demand blood flow and oxygen. Let me see here. John Newberg. So, whenever, think to yourself of passing, I'll teach you, it's an interesting pass here. It's called like a flamingo pass, okay? So you get a leg here and a hand here, and then you walk in, and they'll kind of have their leg here, okay? And then just skip over. Now you're in side control. Anyways, so from side control, what I don't like to do is this right here. The reason why I don't like to do it is because I'm creating a bridge between my elbows and my knees, and I'm not applying a lot of pressure on him. I'm like squeezing him, but I'm not really applying a lot of pressure. Yes, I'm keeping him flat. The other thing I don't like is I don't like to have my hands clasped like this, simply because in order to do any submissions or any form of control, you have to let go, okay? Sometimes this is important, this is good, especially when it's kind of no-gi, but what I prefer is to have a side control that balances between the hip and between the head, okay? My pressure is not chest pressure. I want more core pressure. That's your primary pressure. This is secondary pressure. So if I'm here, okay, this is chest to chest. Do you feel pressure? Maybe a little bit. But I'm very easy to push off because his arm is free. If he just turns to the side, I don't have a lot of control and I immediately slip off, okay? When I'm here, and it's more so my core pressure, I want to pin him. My left hand controls his head, so I constantly want to be taking his head offline of his spine, all right? The way I do that is just move it. I don't want my hands on the mat. And my right elbow controls his far hip, as my right hip controls his right hip. So now as he starts moving, I can move with him, and I'm not stuck to the ground. Okay, side control is a position. It's hard to get, but it's really easy to lose. So it's one of those things where it's going to be a position that you're either going to have to decide ultimately where to go from here, because you don't want to sit a long time here, because from here you have limited kind of submissions. You have a couple of key locks, Kimura, straight arm lock, but in reality those are fairly easy to defend. So what I want to do here is my right elbow controls his far hip, and I'm pinning it. My right hand also keeps the underhook, and I keep my head down because I don't want this left hand come in as a frame. If it does, it's fine, and we're going to talk about what to do. So as it's on the outside, because this arm's either going to be on the outside or on the inside here. Either way, I want to control his hip here and keep rolling him flat, flat, flat. As this arm right here goes across his kind of temple and takes his head offline. Because now, the problem he has is to realign his spine with his head in order to really move. And I'm controlling his far hip. Yeah, so he has to do that. And because my toes are constantly dug in here, I'm not on my knees. I'm dynamic. And if I need to, I can always switch the base this way and back this way. If you notice, my right hip is connected to his right hip, which makes it difficult for him to bring his bottom knee, his right knee in, because I can keep pushing him flat. If he starts really pushing it in and kind of recovering, I can begin to beat that knee and go to what I believe is way more powerful, which is an angled north-south. Because now I'm far away from his legs. They're not a threat. I can control his arms here. I can turn him to the side, go to north-south matrix. I can keep his legs away. Because even if he begins to try to go to his knees or anything here, I can still control him. I have control of his arms here. If I take him this way here, I can begin to turn him on this side here and get into this position, which I call the north-south matrix, and his arm is pinned. Walk this way. And his arm is reasonably pinned here. And now it makes it easier for me to control here. For those of you who are in law enforcement, and many of you are here, it's a lot easier to cut from here, control from here, and you're controlling the head, and you see everything that's going on around you and peripheral. So what we're going to do is we're just going to control, pin, and keep it in flat. Elbow is going to be outside, moving in, right hand, and my elbow's off the mat. Right hand is controlling the underhook, because I don't want him to get the underhook. That's bad for me. Yeah, I don't want that right there. Okay, so I'm gonna constantly keep this underneath my right elbow, pinching his hip, pulling it in towards my hip, and I'm pushing and driving my hip into him as my hand, my arm goes across his head, not his neck, but across his head here. It's a lot weaker across his head than his neck, right here. The other thing that you have to keep in mind is that your right elbow can always, if he slowly starts turning into me, I can always take my elbow, put it on his hip, okay, and control that hip. So now as he tries to turn into me, it becomes very difficult also. And it's a very good pinning position here because there's a lot of pressure here, especially when your hands are off the mat. If your hands are on the mat, less pressure, right? Count to 10.
1, 2, 3, 4.
So just that right there creates a lot of pressure. So your elbows on the outside, pinching towards your hip, your feet are driving them flat, and your elbow can go on top of the hip to keep them flat. Okay? So all we're gonna do, the bottom person is just gonna try to move around a little bit. A little bit here, here, control here, and you will end up going in a circle. Okay? But most important of all, you keep your right hip connected to his hip and my outside elbow controlling the far hip. So as he's moving, because he has nowhere to move except more so in a circle. Because his power movement is when he turns to his side. So if he's able to turn to his side, frame with his hand. And let's say I lost here. This is where you can move his hip away. Move a hip away, hip, 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 shoulder, hip, shoulder. And then you see how much space he made. And that's what I do not want. So I constantly have to keep readjusting to the slippage and the deterioration of the position. My right hand on his hip, right hand under here. So I constantly keep control of the underhook here. And I'm constantly sliding up on him. If he moves away a little bit here and my chest slides up, you readjust because your feet constantly driving lateral. So I control a lot of it is lateral pressure rather than just downward pressure, which is just solely gravity. Okay? Right elbow at the far hip, left hand at the head, and you're constantly torquing yourself because it'll make him go in a circle. If you need to, get here, switch the base. From here, it's an excellent position to mount.